Hi, I'm Venus, and I'm a War Studies and History student at King's. So, during this podcast, I'm going to explain, first of all, why I chose to do this internship and why I chose to write this specific article on Bosnia-Herzegovina and PTSD. So, first of all, why did I choose to do this internship in journalism? It's because I think journalism is such an important aspect of our lives as it's an access to information and it's how we are kind of informed of what's happening in the world. And I thought that it could be interesting to understand how a journalist might work, especially in post-conflict situations or in war. How are we getting the sources, and also how could it be when interviewing some people that experience war and can experience post-traumatic stress disorder. And so I thought it was really interesting to write on the topic of post-war communities and how they might get a chance to rebuild peacefully and reconstruct themselves and heal from the trauma of the war. So I really wanted to focus on something, a subject that really matters to me. And I chose Bosnia because I heard so much about it during my war studies. And especially also in high school, I remember how my high school teacher would emphasize a lot on Bosnian war and Srebrenica massacre. And I heard so much about it, but I feel I still yet know so little about it. And I was thinking that that would be the occasion to educate myself more. And since I feel that after a conflict, we don't really think about those people post-conflict. We don't really talk about them. I never really hear them in news headlines. I know in some newspaper you have certain articles on post-conflict reconstruction and communities, but I never really see them in news headlines, and they're not really the topic that most people might discuss. And if I also chose PTSD in specific is because in war studies last year I had this module called causes and consequences of war, and it was one of my favorite modules. And in the consequences of the war, we came across post-traumatic stress disorder, and I thought it was really interesting how it affected the lives of so many. So first of all, I'm going to explain what's PTSD. So it's a mental illness. It can also be physical in certain cases, but it's mental illness due to an exposition to trauma. It could be just one event, or it could be multiple events. And usually after the war, many people develop syndromes to PTSD and are diagnosed with PTSD. And so you can heal PTSD with medicine and professional help and lots of supports. But if you don't have in your country access to those needs, then it's a bit more difficult, and then it can affect many aspects of your lives. And as we're going to see in my article, I invite you to read it. My article talks about the fact that since Bosnia after the war didn't really have lots of facilities because healthcare facilities have been destroyed during the war and have taken so long to rebuild. It's been quite a long journey for the Bosnian people to have access to healthcare, especially in rural areas. And therefore, this ongoing PTSD that is also very highly stigmatized. Some war veterans were giving some testimonies saying that many, when it came to getting a job and participating into the life after the war and just continuing life, they wanted to go back to work, and so many recruiters would see PTSD in their records and wouldn't let them get a job, or when they would talk around them, they would feel judged and stigmatized because so many people wouldn't believe them. As PTSD could be sometimes, I mean, since it's a mental illness, it's not something physically that you could see, and therefore people might think, oh, this person is lying. And when it's something that's actually really serious, those people can see, can have visions of the war, and it can be something that's very that's a big handicap in everyday life. And I've seen some studies that are showing that PTSD can also be transferred into younger generations when not healed. And in Bosnia, it's quite the case. Younger generation are living with the trauma of the past from their parents, and especially after COVID-19, during COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine, many people were isolated. So that triggered PTSD, and that triggered some memories of the war that led so many people to suicide, and it increased level of anxiety. So that's a big challenge for Bosnia-Herzegovina today still to treat PTSD, as I've seen in some of my research that there's only around 9 psychiatrists for 100,000 people, which is not a lot, and there's a lot of suicide rate. The suicide rate is around 7.5 per 100,000 inhabitants, which according to the World Health Organization is a lot compared to many countries. So yeah, Bosnia does still have a lot for recovery. And in my article, I also wanted to focus a lot about the history of Bosnia-Herzegovina, because we talk a lot about the conflict, we talk about how violent it was, but we never really talk about what were the events that led to the conflict, and what's the deep history of Bosnia-Herzegovina, because the conflict is still quite present. The tensions, from what I've read and also from my understanding, are quite present, and there might not be any more armed violence that can translate into a war, but there is still violence going on in Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is due to PTSD and trauma that hasn't been healed, and state tension, and a lot of nationalism among the different parties that are governing, and this nationalism are dividing those different ethnicities that are coexisting together. So to take into context, there are 3 different ethnic groups: the Bosniak, which are Bosnian Muslims, which actually were Bosnian Serbs and Croats that became Muslims during the Ottoman reign in Bosnia. And so for many Bosnian Serbs and many Bosnian Croats, that was seen as a betrayal. And in Bosnian nationalism, so in the Bosnian view, when it comes to propagating nationalist ideas, they have this historical narrative saying how the Bosnian Muslims are the ones who killed their Prince Lazar, in this history saying that Lazar killed the Sultan, but he was killed by the Bosnian Muslim, which evilized the Bosnian Muslim, and therefore within the history there's this nationalistic narrative that pin people against each other, those different ethnic groups against each other, because at each period of the history we can see that one ethnic group was more powerful than another, and was benefiting of more advantages, and was persecuting the other, when some people living in Bosnia-Herzegovina were saying that there were never really a big division amongst those groups, but nationalist and religious narrative groups were actively divisive, because we could see just before the war, when General Tito was governing Yugoslavia, and the different Slavic ethnic groups were living together, he suppressed those national identities and nationalist groups, and there was a lot of mixed marriages in between those ethnic groups, and it seemed to be more peaceful than it actually is today, because today it's very rare to see mixed marriages. And I've read some books saying that just after the war, or I mean it was during the war, there were some mixed marriages, and they were trying to give birth, and no one would actually accept their baby. No hospital would recognize them because they were mixed. And I thought that was really heartbreaking to actually see how nationalism could break up people that have very similar backgrounds. And even if ethnicity and religion, because I forgot to mention, but in those ethnic groups, there's a big divide with religion as well. But those ethnic groups that were living all together and have very similar cultures and similar languages, how divisive they could be because of nationalistic narratives. So I thought that was quite interesting to do my research on that and to include it also in the article. And I really encourage you to read it and to do a bit more research on how PTSD might affect post-conflict communities, because it does affect so many people, and even many years after. It's only been 30 years since the Bosnian War has ended, but it still is quite present in many memories and quite alive. And so many people have to deal with the trauma of the war, especially young generations too. So I wanted to shed the light on that, and I'm very happy that I've had the chance to write an article on this issue. And there are some solutions though that slowly are coming for the mental health care services in Bosnia. They're actively working with international organizations to promote mental health, but it's quite slow. So yeah, thank you for listening. I hope you will read the article and that you will have learned some new things. So thank you very much.